warn you that there is somebody down the road that's decided to have a birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
They've hired the guest house down the road.
Mm-hmm.
There's music coming out of there like...
Yeah.
You might hear it on the soundtrack a little bit. When you listen later, you might just hear a tiny little... Don't think it's me. Hey,
sure,
guys down the road.
Yeah, sure. I've already started to record. People out there is the Big R Solutions. As you know that the Big R is all about finance, nothing else but finance. Financial matters are very important. They are cornerstone of everything that we do. All of us, we are what we are today because of money. And they'll tell you one of the, the Reserve Bank governor in England once said, I don't mind who writes the laws, as long as I issue the currency, I'm in control of the currency. That all it matters. So it's a very, very important tool. And I'm sure being the first interview on this subject, you'll really enjoy. And as you can see on my left-hand side, I've got a very esteemed somebody, Zak King. Zak King is a very, some people sometimes they come up with ideas that are not there. Some of us have been in that review for some time. But Zak is the first one to really notice that you need, to inform people about this process, educate people. And that's what the Big R is all about. Big R is about education. We talk money, we don't say, we are not talking pyramid scheme. No, that's not what we are. We are saying, educate yourself, then you'll have money. People ask me all the time, how do one make money? I said, education, more than anything else. Maybe our education system is not what is supposed to be, because they don't teach about money. So Zak noticed that, and he closed that gap. And I can tell you, audience, if you can lay your hand on debt-free magazine, you learn a lot. Some of us as debt counselors, we always go to debt-free magazine and learn a lot. It's an eye-opener. Zak, it was one way or another of welcoming you to the Big R show, and so that we unpack. Some people may call it a monster. It's not a monster. It's a very important subject, a debt review, because debt is important. Debt is money. Debt is money. Now let me start here, Zak. Before I go any further, people might want to know who's Zak. Where does he come from? What is his background? What is education? I think this is the best education. But we are living in a world whereby certificates are still big. When I was interviewed last week on SABC Channel 404, the lady who was arranging for that interview, he said, Dr. Chawa. I said, I'm not doctor. He said, no, this morning I've been interviewing doctor. Said, don't worry, Mr. Chaval, you'll be a doctor. So I said, no, I'm not worried. Whether I become a doctor or not, that's not an issue. What is important is the capacity here. That's what Zak is. He's Zak King. Zak, tell us.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be on the show. I really appreciate it. And just a little bit about myself. I am a South African. I grew up in the Cape Town area. I've lived in KZN and Johannesburg along the way. I'm back in Cape Town at the moment. I like it in Cape Town. Mm-hmm. And I have a background in marketing and counseling. That's actually my background.
Okay.
Before I entered the world of debt review. Mm-hmm. So debt review kind of was a new concept several years ago. We're now well established as an industry. But at the time, it was a new concept. And as someone who, when I was younger, our family went through tough financial times. I'm one of those people who's lived it as a younger person in a household that's going through tough times. And it's not easy. It puts a lot of pressure on everybody. And fortunately, as a family, we managed to come through that situation, but it took a number of years. And so it made me very sympathetic to, people who are having financial difficulty. It is a hard thing, especially to keep one's dignity through difficult financial times. And so how excited we were when we heard about the National Credit Act introducing debt review. So I went for a course that was being offered at the time, did the course, came out the other side and decided I know everything about debt counseling. And I was very wrong, as is everybody that goes through some sort of educational course before they start working in an industry. I had many delusions, many incorrect ideas that soon came to the fore when I went into business for myself as a debt counselor. Started a practice, started dealing with people who were having financial difficulties, and got to see there's a great need for education. In debt review, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It can really help people. It's amazing. But one of the weaknesses we have as an industry is we share a lot of information with people when they start the process over a day, when we interview them and we deal with them, and then we forget to tell them those same things again and again. So after about a year, we realized there's a real need for that as an organization. We began doing a newsletter to our clients. Later, we realized there's a need to share this newsletter with other people. And eventually we realized the newsletter is not going to cut it. And we changed what we were doing. So we started producing a magazine, a monthly online magazine, online, so we can give it for free. Because wow,
I like that.
Yeah, when you're handling debt issues, the last thing you need to do is pay for something else. So it's a free publication that shares information about the debt review process. And like you said, education is key. You need to understand what you're doing. You need to understand before you make the decision to enter debt review. You need to understand how it works, and then during it, it's nice to have reminders and information about what's changing with debt review as time goes by. So that's a little bit about me. I'm the editor of the Debt Free magazine. That's a digital magazine and sometimes print magazine.
You know what? You have just said something very, very important, which touches on decision. Because whatever decision you make has an impact. I'll tell you one little story. I was telling my son here and saying, everything went well when I started working. I had abundance of money at my disposal. The mistake that I did, I bought a car at the end of that year. That was the beginning of chaos. My life has been chaotic for the next 20 years. 20 years, not 2 years, 20 years to really get out of the mud. I was in the mud. So I hear what you are saying. And the reason why I did that, I was not informed. Hence, education. I like what you are saying. Be exposed to education, whether you are in debt, so that you make proper decisions. Why is it important for people to be informed? I know I've said part of it, but probably can add.
Well, sorry, I think, one of the issues with debt is that it is such a vast subject. So, for instance, it's easy to get debt, but it's not so easy to get out of debt. And it's weird how no one ever tells you that. Yeah. Everyone says, I want to give you credit, but they don't use the word, I want to give you debt. They're the same thing.
I like that. Yeah.
We forget that. And so it's important just to understand what it is that we're committing to. And then for those of us who have made wise use of credit, even if you've made the best use of credit and you have a very stable life, along comes 2020 and throws everything out the window. Even all your best planning and arrangements can change because of factors outside of your control. And so when that happens, it's good to have a general knowledge about finances and the economy so that you know what options are available to you. And so, for instance, like a lot of people don't know a lot about debt review, it's actually something worth knowing about because it's a wonderful way to, in a responsible way, handle your debts and keep your dignity. It's a fantastic thing. But there's still people in South Africa who don't really know about it. or who don't understand it.
mm,
Often when we speak to people who are having financial difficulty, one of the real sources of the problem is that they committed to things they didn't really understand. They don't really understand what's involved. And that can be a number of things. It can even be when you take a loan from the bank and you loan 1,000 Rand. And in your mind, you think, I'm going to pay back 1,000 Rand. But that's not true, because they add fees and interest and initiation fees and monthly fees and interest compounds over time. You can end up paying back a lot more money. But it's, once again, it's just a case of educating oneself about how it works. And as the average South African, unfortunately, as a country, our financial literacy is not great. It's not fantastic. There's a number of factors why that's the case, but it just means that for most of us, we don't know as much as we think we know.
You know, you have mentioned something very, very important. You know, one of my heroes, Robert Kiyosaki, I'm one of his mentees. He mentored me at some point, I think 2009. He mentioned that in financial cycle, words, terminology is very important. And in most cases, they bamboozle us with words. As you said, they say credit, not debt, because debt looks bad, you know, the other way. And then I like the manner where you coming from, education. And I would appeal to anyone, if you want to learn more, get in touch with Debt Free magazine, a digital one. You can read it on your phone. You can read it anywhere, just to learn, because it will definitely open up your mind. Now, you have already told us that you decided to come up with magazines so that people can be educated. And it's not only the consumer to be educated. I'm sure you're also trying to teach the debt counselors and their staff. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, there's a real need in the industry to understand each other's viewpoints. That's also something that we've found. As credit providers, sometimes it's difficult to understand the motivations of a debt counselor. And as a debt counselor, sometimes it's difficult to understand the motivations of a credit provider or a credit bureau or a payment distribution agent or a consumer going through difficult times. So it's nice to share different viewpoints. It just helps us get a little bit closer and be more sympathetic and empathetic when we're dealing with one another. And that's always a good thing. The more we talk to each other, the more we communicate, that's always going to be a good thing.
You know, it's a pity you're not in my studio. I would also give you a cup of tea. So I'm sharing the tea alone. It was a little bit chilly, and then I decided to take one. Now, Zach, you know, as I listened to you, you said you started being a debt counselor yourself, going through the course. Then you realized that it's more to it than meet the eye. Then you evolved, came up with magazine, but that's not the only innovation that you brought. What other innovations you brought along? I know, but for my audience out there, it would be nice to share with them. As you said, the most important thing was all the stakeholders to understand the point of view of all of us where we are coming from. So can you share what other innovative ideas that you have brought?
I think you have in mind the Debt Review Awards.
Yes.
So the Debt Review Awards concept is the idea of having an Oscars or an Emmy Awards for debt counseling and for debt review. An awards process where we say these companies or these individuals are doing very well, copy them. And I think that is important to just realize, even within an industry where people are helping one another, or in an industry where people offer credit, not all companies and not all individuals that you deal with are going to be exactly the same. You will find some who are putting in extra effort. They go a little bit further. They try a little bit harder. And that's why it's always good to do research beforehand, before, like, for instance, getting help from someone or applying for credit somewhere. It's always good to do a little bit of homework. And this process is an awards process. So what happens during each year is people within the industry have the opportunity to do reviews where they say how those on the other side of the industry are doing well. So for instance, as an example, you might have a debt counselor who regularly deals with all the banks every single day in helping clients. And they do a review about banks in particular. And they'll say, well, this bank, this is how they're doing. This other bank, that's how they're doing. We take that information from all sorts of people across the industry. And there are actually, at the moment, there are 8,000 credit providers registered in South Africa, and over 1,500 active debt counselors in the industry at the moment. So that's thousands of people. We ask them, would you like to contribute to this process? And it just enables us to keep an eye on what's happening. And throughout the year, that information gets crunched in a giant computer. And at a particular time each year, we hold a very modest little get-together where we hand out we have golden piggy banks, because the industry is all about saving money and saving people's dignity. So these golden piggy banks that get given to particular companies and individuals who've done incredibly well during the year to make debt review better. And it's very exciting always to see which companies are standing out this year, which individuals have gone that little bit further. It's a very nice process. And each year, for instance, 50 debt counselors are mentioned and receive recognition to say, hey, these are debt counselors who are working very hard in the different size categories. These are the different banks that are doing well. These are the people who are helping people get out of debt.
You know what? I'm sure you are actualizing the Pavlov reward theory. You know, the Russian psychologist. You know, people need to be rewarded. I'm sure we see it every day. You know, if you have children and you keep on condemning them, they will never be good, because they will always think that, you know what, whether I do this or not, I don't do it, it's the same. I get the same reaction. I think it was a noble thing to do. It encourages all the parties to say, but let me find out in that award, any space for consumers to say the best consumer, or it's something that is not there, or you can think about it?
One of the things that we do like to, as a part of the awards ceremony, is we recognize people who've paid up their debt. So often when we have it in person, of course this year was slightly different, we have actual interviews with people who've been through the process to say, this is what I came into the process with. I had 200,000 rands debt and I was way out of control. Or I had 1 million rands debt and I was out of control. Life was crazy. I entered debt review. I went through the process and now I'm paid up. I'm actually debt free. And that's one of the things that we like to mention. If you want to start to build wealth, the first step is to get debt free.
Exactly.
Take that off your back. And then start to build wealth in a wise way. And that could be through the use of credit, maybe, but there are other ways to build wealth. But certainly get that debt off your back so that you can really look forward to just living that debt-free life. It's the new rich lifestyle, to not owe everybody your future. Often that's one of the things we say when we talk about credit is we're selling our future. We're selling the time and energy that we're going to use in the future to pay someone back. So we've got to be careful of doing that and overcommitting, because the future is unpredictable. One minute everything's fine, the next somebody sneezes in China, in Wuhan, and then suddenly things get crazy. So,
No, you're absolutely right. Debt is new money. So if you understand how money works, the rich use debt to be rich. Can't use your money to build a wealth, you must use debt. But you will never use debt once you still have bad debt. Remember, they use good debt, not the bad debt. So it's very important. Now, one of the questions that might arise, or a person might ask, when did this, let's start here. When did debt counseling start? And when did the awards start? When were they started, you know, compared to processes?
Yeah, it took quite a while for the Debt Review Awards to come into reality. It was an idea that had been around for a while. Debt counseling really has quite a long history, but its formation came in when, of course, government wrote an act, an actual, they draft an act, they draft a bill, it goes through parliament, people make comments, and eventually it becomes a law in the country. And then more than that, it becomes a law that's active in the country. So that happened all the way back in 2007. That was what was happening. In 2007 and 8, suddenly you started finding debt counselors for the first time that had been for exams and training, and they were starting to help people. And then around that time, because around 2010 was some of the first conversations about, you know what, it would be nice to recognize companies and individuals who are doing really well in this industry. It was still a baby industry at the time. And it took a while until about 2014. And in 2014, we were able to have enough cooperation in the industry. Now, that's something that changed over time. People, when a new law comes into effect that changes the way things are done, sometimes there's a little bit of butting of heads, competition, and conflict. Over time, people get used to it. So that's something very much that's happened in the world of debt review, where at first debt counselors were often fighting a lot with the banks. Now there's a lot of cooperation because the banks know this is a great way to get money back from consumers in a realistic way. So debt review has changed a lot. 2014, we had the first Debt Review Awards. It was held in Cape Town in one of the first kind of banking buildings in South Africa. The first place.
You can mention them, no problem. You can mention them. Look, let me be honest with you. I'm not going to edit anything here. My style of doing things, I want people to be free to talk whatever that they want to talk. You know, and then if you think that I'm going to edit it, you can mention them. Sometimes people say, no, we are giving them mileage. Give them, if need be, because it's important. Because sometimes if you say banks, people might not even know what banks are you talking about. Mention whoever that you want. Yeah.
Well, what I will say is that in South Africa, there are actually about more than 25 banks. There's a few more than that. But most of us deal with the big 6 banks, the banks that we recognize from their TV adverts. And those banks, they belong to the Banking Association of South Africa as well. And we got a lot of support from that banking association to start the process. And each year we get more and more support from more companies, more people being involved, people phoning us up and saying, can I help? How can I help? How can I be part of this process? Because it is an important thing in any industry to identify companies who are doing well. You know, they are the industry leaders, and it's a good way to have an industry leader. Then you say, why are they a leader? How can I be like them? And that's important. So we're seeing across the industry at the moment within debt review, debt counselors really are doing the best job they have ever done right now. And this year has been a crazy year. So it's been the best year for debt counselors to do the best job. And I think next year it's going to be challenging as well. So you definitely want companies and individuals who are working hard, you know. So we're very proud that people get nominated, they get awarded. They're going home with those golden piggy banks. And if you ever want to know about that, you can go to debtreviewawards.co.za. That's the website, Debt Review Awards. There's a lot of information about the process there.
Debtreviewawards.co.za. I'll tell you one thing. I want to ask this question. Prior to debt review, there was any mechanism of assisting clients or not assisting clients, the creditors? Remember now, we are not looking only at consumers. I know that the National Credit Act, it's biased towards the consumers. But remember also the creditors are also running a business. They've employed our mothers and sisters and so on. So they also want to get some benefit out of the whole thing. Now, prior to that, because I don't think the intention of the National Credit Act was that people go out there and make debt and then and default deliberately so. It was just to fast track that, okay, You have problems, but let's help you to pay off because those people also still have to run their business. Was any
Absolutely.
mechanism for the creditors to get the money prior to that?
Well, actually, it's interesting that a lot of the rights that credit providers had in regard to collecting money still exist. They've been adjusted slightly, and of course, there's some additional things like debt review. But when you sign a contract with your credit provider, a lot of the things that used to be in the past are still there. For instance, you agree with a credit provider, give me money, I will spend it, and I will pay you back. If I don't pay you back, call in the lawyers. I will pay for the lawyers to sue me. That's still built
That's a
into a
nice
lot of
one.
contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah, we agree to that stuff today. And in fact, those provisions are actually fair.
Mhm.
When you get that contract and you say, if I don't pay, come after me, let's go to court, let's fight about it. That's fair, and that's a right that you're giving credit providers, and it's a right that credit providers have to collect money. In fact, these days, it's even more strict than before. Within a certain amount of time, they need to take you to court. Otherwise, they can lose out on collecting their money. Over time, definitely, as you've said, the law has leaned slightly towards consumers, slightly, because as a consumer, we don't know a lot. But credit providers, they've got fancy lawyers, they've got fancy people who know all the laws, so they can take advantage of it, whereas we are perhaps less able. So it's nice that the law leans a little bit, just a little, not a lot, just a little towards
Just a
the
little.
consumer,
Yeah.
just a little.
Yeah.
And even debt counselors is very interesting. Often consumers might think that a debt counselor works for the consumer to protect them against a credit provider. That's not true. Actually, a debt counselor is someone who's in the middle and has to be fair to both sides and make sure, yes, the credit provider is going to get their money back, but in an affordable way. So it's just to play that balancing act. And debt counselors actually work for the courts in many ways because they provide information to the courts so that they can make judgment calls. So the laws haven't changed unrecognizably, but the National Credit Act did help bring a little more balance. I think that's a fair statement. A little more balance to the consumer side, just a little.
You know what? You have brought something to my mind. You may ask, what does the big R stands for? The big R, you may correct me because you're an English person. I'm not. I just use the little that I know, the little that I learned from school. The big R stands for all the principle. Our principle in the big R, they stand for all the positive R words, like responsibility, read, research. So you are saying the consumers, as much as they went out to borrow, whatever that they borrowed, they had to have responsibility in order to pay their debt back. That's a very important one thing. A very important thing because the reason why we came up with the big R, I studied our situation in South Africa, but not only South Africa, the whole world, that sometimes it's always easy to blame. We even see it with our kids. When you reprimand them, no, they find an excuse to blame something else or somebody else without taking responsibility. And the reason why I took that direction is because, just like you, I'm from the very same family, very poor family. I've been poor for the larger part of my life. And I didn't like it because it's not good. It's not cool to be in a poor situation. Then I always wanted, from childhood, I always want to have money. And my question was very simple. The people who are making money are just like me and Zach. They have two hands, one head, 2 feet, same 24 hours. How do they do it? That's when I started reading books, Robert Kiyosaki, Richard Branson, Donald Trump. You may not like him as a politician, but as a businessman, you learn a lot. I learned a lot from Donald Trump, and some of the principles I use them. They work for me. Then I realized that, okay, if people want to solve their problem, let them do research, which is the other positive R words. Let them read, all right? Let them take responsibility. Let them be resilient, because everything is coming at you, all right? And let them check the results. Let them review. Let them reflect. So this is what you are saying. So which is perfect. It fits very well, And I just wanted to add on what you are saying, that as much as we are helping consumers, but we don't have to be biased. We don't have to lean towards the consumer or the creditor. We have to be independent. I've seen it in my practice, whereby one client, just to give an example, came to me, a taxi boss. He had a lot of taxis, and this guy had about 4 wives. Then, as well, there's no problem having 4 wives, because in our culture, I'm a Zulu, there's no problem. All right, although I have 1 wife. Well, I don't believe in having too many spouses, all right? Because one thing I always argue and say, it's not possible to love 2 people at the same time. There's one that you lean towards, all right? So it's a little bit unfair. And I'm saying, if we as men say, that's me, all right? If we as men say, let's have more than 1 wives, can we allow women also to have more husbands? But I understand the background of my culture. My culture, a Zulu culture, why a Zulu man takes more than 1 wife. They look at vulnerables. If there is a woman there who's vulnerable, having children, can't support herself, they were saving them by marrying them. And it is done responsibly, another R words, responsibly, by engaging the first wife to say, look at that house, and let me help them, let me marry them, okay? And I know in the Muslim community also, that culture is there. So we cannot condemn. We are not expected to condemn anything, all right? We find ourselves in an environment, we need to adjust, but we don't have a right to condemn. And I like what the Bible says. Don't judge, all right? I'm not saying you must be Christian or not Christian, but don't judge. I'm not judging here. So I definitely agree with you and say it's important as people to be responsible, check results, review, reflect, then we can succeed. And this book, the Debt Free magazine, it helps because it helps you to read, all right? Refresh your mind, learn a lot, all right? It's part of researching as you do it. Remember, you've done part of the research, and as debt counsel, we research further, all right? And so it's beautiful. Anyone who wants to learn more, I'm still gonna talk to you from time to time.
Now, so don't tease us, though. We want to know what happened with the man with the 4 wives and the many taxis. How were you able to?
All right. This is what happened, because I nearly forgot that. And thanks for reminding me. This is what happened. This guy said to me, as we were doing the budget, the grocery, I want to give them 5,000 each. I said, Chief, that's 20,000. He said, no, I must give them. I said, what about your creditors? Remember, they didn't come to you. You went to them. And for me, I don't think it's fair. He said, no, I'm not going to agree if you don't. I said, no, it's unfair. You want to get all the niceties. After getting the niceties, and then at the expense of other people, I said, no. And then he left. I said, it's fine, well and good. I'd rather lose a client rather than being irresponsible, because I was going to be irresponsible if I allow that. So I was adding to what you said. Client also need to remember that they need to be fair. Now, this is one of the questions that I can ask. With your experience, interaction with a lot of stakeholders, have you seen debt counseling being the best solution for under-stressed consumers?
Yeah, so look, I do tend to favor debt counseling. There are a number of solutions, though, and it really does depend on the individual person. I have seldom met someone who would not benefit from debt review. if that's the right way to look at it. You know, when they tell us that statistic that half of all South Africans are months behind on paying our credit, that doesn't mean that the other half are living without stress financially. It just means that they're living with the stress and still managing to make those payments, but they're feeling the pressure. And this year, I think, has pushed all of us over the edge. You know, I think that statistic is now 95% of people are months behind on their payments. So debt review is often the right solution. It is a great solution in that it's very simple in its core. Pay less over slightly longer. That's really all debt review is. It's just a case of figuring out how much less over how much longer. Because we don't want to end up paying forever and ever and ever. That would be unrealistic as well. But there are other solutions out there. For instance, we mentioned one solution. One solution is you can say to the bank, please sue me. Let's go to court and fight about it. Some people love that solution. They think it's the best solution ever. Other people prefer to use options like sequestration. That's also an option that works for some people. But for many people, debt review is a wonderful relief because you get that feeling of satisfaction. I am paying my debt. I am making progress, but I'm doing it at a pace that I can handle, at a realistic pace. And that is a very important thing. If we overcommit, then we're also looking for trouble. So it calls for balance, but it is a great solution. I would definitely recommend people research it, to use one of the R's, and then really think about it because it can really help you with your financial challenges.
If I may ask this question, your work involves research, you know. The creditors, when you talk in terms of numbers, how far, I mean, how have they collected? Have they collected less, or have they collected more using debt review compared to the previous years when there was no debt review? Give me numbers. I know you've got numbers. If you don't have, yeah.
What I would just share for the benefit of the viewer is to say that if someone calls you and says, you owe the bank money, give me the money, I'm phoning on behalf of a bank, that person works for commission. They get commission for collecting money from you. So that means the money goes to them, some of it, and not the bank. Now that is very different with debt review, where almost all the money goes to the bank. When a bank uses a collection agent, maybe an attorney that phones you up, they end up giving the bank's money away. They give quite a lot away to collect that money. When it goes through things like administration, for instance, they can lose a quarter of the money to fees and charges easily. Whereas through debt review, they're hardly paying anything at all. If they're paying 5% each month, that's a lot. Normally, the fees are very low in debt review. So they actually end up collecting more through debt review, which is why over time, the attitude that the credit providers have had, at first it was very much like, we don't know if we like this thing. Over time, as you mentioned, the collections figures have gone up into the millions and millions and hundreds of millions each month. They've realized, hey, wait a minute, this is a great way to help our clients, because our clients can still go to the shop, they can still afford the food they need, the electricity they need, the telephone calls they need, they can still send their kids to school, they can still fix their car when it breaks down. But we know, guaranteed, we are going to get our payment at the end of the month. And that's also very important for banks. When you pay a bank 1 month, but not the next month, it's hard for them to plan financially. But when you pay them every single month the same amount, they're able to plan ahead very nicely. And the banks like that. That is very good. So that's actually another reason why debt review has become more popular amongst the banks and the credit providers, because they know it's reliable, it's realistic. And sometimes, although the amounts are small, they can count on those amounts coming in each month over time. They don't have to stress about it. Whereas when they're phoning you up and sending you SMSs and chasing you, and 1 month you pay them, and the next month you don't pay them, and then you fight with the collector, that's very difficult for them, and they end up paying a lot of money to the lawyers to collect, which is not great for them. So they like debt review. Certainly, they like debt review.
You mentioned something very important, which is the question what we always get. What is the difference between debt review and administration?
Okay, yes. So administration at its time was quite groundbreaking and original, and it was a good idea, absolutely. But over time, it ended up with a lot of the, as I mentioned, the fees going to the people doing the collecting. So what often commonly happens with administration is you pay smaller amounts because they have a limit of how much money can be put into the process of administration. For many years, that was 50,000 Rand. If you had debts and you added them all up and they came in under 50,000 Rand, you could go into administration, and you would pay every third month sometimes, or they would collect money for 3 months and then they would give it to the credit provider. Whereas that is it's an okay process. It's not bad if you have very small debts. But these days, 50,000 Rand, I can get that on 2 credit cards. If I run out and ask people at the bank, can I please have credit cards? And they give me credit. I can go shopping in 2 days and I can run up 50,000 Rand debt. So when they made the National Credit Act, they said, we need something for someone who's got a lot more debt. Someone who's got 200,000, 400,000, 1 million, 5 million. I remember my one client had 5 million Rand debt because he'd been out shopping for cars. He loved cars. He was spending money on cars. He couldn't stop himself. And he was earning a lot of money at one stage. Then things changed. So they needed a mechanism that could cover things like that, where you didn't need to go and try take someone's house away from them, take someone's car away from them and sell it on auction. They wanted to find something that was somewhere else in the middle. And that's where debt review really fits. It has a very high threshold. You can put almost any amount of debt into the process, whereas administration has a very low threshold. And is perhaps, we could describe it as an older process with more fees going to the people collecting, whereas debt review is a newer process. It allows a lot more debt to go in, but also with less fees being involved. So it's very common for people who get help with debt review. Each month, maybe they will pay some professional fees, because you must remember a debt counselor, like an attorney or like a professor or like a doctor, is a professional. They're a trained professional. They normally get, and I'm just using an average in the industry, somewhere between 125 Rand and 150 Rand a month is the fees that go towards that over time. Now, if you think, can I go and hire an attorney for 150 Rand to look after me for a whole month? It's impossible.
It's impossible.
You can get a counselor to help you for that whole month, and that's the little bit that you get put one side in the process towards it. Just as an example of fees, that's not a fixed fee because it works on a percentage, but that's a good example of kind of what people end up paying. You can see that's a very small amount. It's a very reasonable amount. In fact, just by saving some of the people in debt review, because of the way the interest rates are changed, that also has a huge impact. So for instance, under administration, you might end up paying something at a high percentage of interest over a very long time. And it could just go on and on and on and on and on. Whereas with debt review, very often a goal, within so many months, I'm going to pay off my debt. The interest rates are often reduced. Some of the credit providers bring it down to zero. They say, we will get rid of all that interest. Just pay us what you can. And they arrange it. So it is a very different process, although there are, of course, similarities.
I'll tell you one thing. In a layman's term, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Will I be right to say, if you go under administration, your debt must be at 50,000 Rand? Anything beyond that is debt review. Am I right?
Even if your debts are 50,000 Rand, it's worth still looking at debt review, because ultimately, as I mentioned, it'll probably go faster and you'll probably save more over time, because the credit providers, as I mentioned, they've really come to the party. They've said, how low can we charge interest to help you get out of debt faster?
mm,
Now, you might think that's a strange thing to do,
mm,
but
mm,
what they really want to do is they want you to get back on your feet and start using credit in a good way.
mm.
As
You
you
know
mentioned,
what?
good credit. They want you to
Yeah.
start using good credit. They want you to be a consistent, good credit user because that's actually good for their business.
You know what? You have mentioned something very important, which should be acknowledged here, that creditors, the majority of them, they want to help consumers. Like you said, they even go to an extent of reducing their, I've seen it to zero, 0.05, which shows that they are willing to help. Now, as a follow-up to that, remember I said the majority of them show willingness. You are absolutely correct. I started in 2008. At the beginning, well, we're fighting. We're fighting. It was dog eat dog. We're passing each other. Cars were taken while clients are under that review. So it was a real war. But now everything has improved. One question that I would like to ask, are we still having some creditors who are still not playing a ball? I don't expect all of them to be in the party. I'm
So, yeah, so
sure there
we're
are one or two.
unrealistically
Don't mention
thinking.
them. Don't mention them, because the idea is not to bash anyone. But maybe this interview will be looked by creditors, and
Yeah.
then those who are still, left behind, they can start realizing that there are some people watching. All right.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Look, there, I would say that there is 95% cooperation across the industry just with the process itself, which is great.
Mm,
Within the process, sometimes strange things come along,
mm,
and you go through a period of time where maybe because of a policy change within a very big organization, it
mm,
can make some challenges, not
mm,
challenges that can't be overcome, but
mm,
definitely it makes extra work for the people who are trying to sort the problem out.
mm.
Um, but I would say, in general, the idea is if you're dealing with, can I use a bank as an example, just to
Yeah,
say
no
a
problem.
bank? If you're dealing
Yeah.
with a bank, doesn't matter which one, that is a very big organization.
Mm,
That's thousands of people.
mm,
Within those thousands and thousands of people, you've got a small group of people who specialize
mm,
in debt review. And
mm,
those people are very different from everyone else at the bank.
mm,
Everyone else at the bank who's in collections, they're in it for commission. I want commission. I must collect a lot.
mm,
These people, they don't have that as their job description. Their job description is to make this process work in a reasonable way. So
mm,
as long as they're getting reasonable arrangements and suggestions, they normally go along with it. Sometimes we end up fighting because the amounts are quite small and they
mm,
would like a little bit more. Or maybe they would like it over a certain amount of months, and we say, look, that's not going to work for this client. So we have a little bit of back and forth.
mm,
But
mm,
as a rule, the credit providers are really cooperative within the debt review department. If you're dealing with other departments, legal collections in particular, or outsourced collections, those guys, it's a very different. That's why you struggle when those people phone you and start sending you SMSs.
mm,
Those people are difficult to deal with.
mm,
Whereas the debt review people, they seem so nice to deal with. They're like, hey, wow, why are these people so nice to me? As you mentioned, they want to help the clients get resolved. They want to resolve the thing and help the client start to make those payments regularly and get out of the process. In fact, every debt counselor is a strange business person because they want to lose all their clients. That's actually what they want. They want all their clients to get rid of them and not need
yeah,
them anymore. So
yeah, yeah,
imagine, like,
yeah,
it's an unusual industry, but our
yeah.
real goal, we're counselors. We want to help people get out of debt and start making wealth.
Nothing is perfect in life, and I agree with you. It's a big organization with a small office that deal with debt review. Just like lawyers, some lawyers don't understand what debt review. I gave one of my case to one lawyer. He made a meal. He made a mess out of it, but understandably so. We specialize, and it's understandable. So I fully agree with you. But the intention is not bad. Even the lawyer, the intention was not bad. The intention was to assist. But if you don't specialize, it's not your specialty. So I really, really agree with you. Zak King, I really enjoyed this interview. I still have to talk more with you, man. You know, we can tap a lot from your brain. You have accumulated so much information, and let's share this information with our people out there. Let them learn. You know what? As much as we are crying about COVID-19, but it has made things easier now. I can talk to you being in Cape Town using the digital. So
It's forced the digital revolution,
yeah,
yes.
it won't be a problem. I'll interview you anytime, you know, as long as you've got the time, you see, and then so that our people can learn more. And then I really appreciate. And then Zach, if they want to keep in touch with you or in touch with your office and or lend their hands on the magazine, and then just give them that information.
Okay, so you can go on the website, which is Debt Free Digi. It's three things together: debt, free, and then DIGI. So that's short for digital,
Okay.
because it is a digital publication.
Yeah.
So debtfreedigi.co.za. Or you can search on the internet and just say Debt Free Magazine. Google will help you along the way. And as I mentioned, we don't charge for our publication. We give away information, training, and teaching for free. We think free is the best price. You know, that's the best price, free. So if you can, by all means, visit us. And if you have the means to help us, we're always looking for volunteers and help. So thank you very much. That'd be lovely.
Let me tell you the free way it comes from. If you know, I'm a Christian, but I'm not undermining other religion. That should be clear. I believe in one thing: religion is free. People can follow any religion; it's fine. I don't have a problem. You see, me as a Christian, in the Bible it says, I'm coming to your word of free. When Adam and Eve, when they faltered, then God said, from now on, you are going to get things through your blood and sweat. But remember, prior to that, he said, here is a Garden of Eden. You can eat anything that you want. So free has always been there. And my real belief is education should be free everywhere. Because remember, education unpack, you know, for us to be able to deal with difficult issues on earth. All right. So now you can imagine if everything is free. And then nowadays with digital world, you get things for free. And then people can go to our YouTube line, learn for free. So I commend you for that. And then I wanted to compliment what you said and say free started a long time ago.
I wanted to also say that when I was a young man, my father said to me, I've been rich in my life and I've been poor. And he said, and rich was better.
Yeah.
So I've always thought that's a funny thing to say. But absolutely, I think if people can get a handle on their debt situation and can financially educate themselves, wow, then suddenly it opens up doors to you. You can really plan for the future in an effective way. So if we can be a small part of just sharing information and education about finances, that makes us very happy to help empower people.
Zach, nice talking to you. And the Big
Thanks,
R,
man.
we also have a membership club where we educate a different platform. I'll also invite you at some point to that platform to share with our members, because those members, their aim is to learn. Because I always tell them, learn, then you succeed. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate. I know that you are very busy, and we'll keep in touch. Once you come to Joburg one day, let's get together. Then,
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I'll offer you a coffee that I didn't offer you today. Thank you, Zach. Much appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you, man.